This is really spearheaded through Tara, who's you probably have all seen, has done a lot of footwork, interested in this campus looking at ImpactSuite, which is who he's representing, as a tool for our students. So with that, I'm gonna let you add your comments of yourself.
Perfect, thank you.
Hey Mark, are you recording this session so we could share it with some?
Yes, I think we have 2 different recordings of this, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, and I would
Thank you,
also like
Brian.
a redness scan.
Yes, and I donated my blood before I came here. You guys should have everything. Not much more to say about me, but I appreciate the intro. Yes, I'm a representative here with ImpactSuite, and I've been working with Tara here for the last little bit, and she's been a phenomenal support in trying to push what I think is a great effort of trying to get full mental health solutions for all of the students here on campus. It's something as an organization we care a lot about. I've told Tara about a big push of ours is we give these resources free to teenagers all over the world. It's a big part of our movement and what we feel is important to do. And so the next level for us is we'd love to be able to get on campus, but of course that costs money to be able to actually, we can't just give free to everybody. And so I appreciate that she's pushing to try to get this as a resource for everybody throughout the university as well. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about our services towards the end, but really I wanted today to kind of talk a little more about the need for a paradigm shift in how we're approaching mental health and how we're addressing mental health as a society and in organizations. And so that's kind of a little more of where we're going to go with the conversation today. Now, I want to start out talking about SimCity, which I know is kind of a weird way to start, but everybody here in this room, I just want you guys to tell me a little bit more about what SimCity is. Who has played that game and can tell me more of what it is?
I have no idea what it is.
Okay. So you're not going to tell us.
I'm not gonna tell.
Simulation, you create your own avatar and home and interact with other people that have accounts. I
Yeah,
guess.
well, and one thing I know about the developers of both SimCity and The Sims was that The Sims was created after the lead product developer's house burned down. And so he started building a virtual world that he basically replicated the house that burned down and used it as a form of therapy for himself.
That's pretty cool.
And then, you know,
You're a wealth of knowledge.
yeah.
That's William.
Yes. So and then SimCity was a sort of earlier adaptation of that as like an economic simulator.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what would you say is the general purpose when you're in there having this simulation, creating and developing homes and people? What's the general purpose of what you're trying to accomplish inside SimCity?
Exploration and play.
Exploration and play, yeah. And I would say maybe to make your avatars happy, right? Help them find success, or sometimes it's the opposite, right? We can do some crazy things in there. So now let's talk about SimCity, the Depressed Edition. Okay. Essentially, inside SimCity, you have control over this entire avatar's life, right? The building they live in, the individual they fall in love with. If you were to try to create the most depressing possible situation for your avatar inside of SimCity, what would you do?
Isolate them.
Mm-hmm.
Isolate them?
Cut them off from basic necessities like mental health, dental, eye care, and then slowly make them physically miserable over time.
So a lot of the
Sounds
physical
like
aspect.
Introduce capital.
Yeah, lack of access to basic resources, opportunity, jobs, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I love the isolation with that is too. It kind of ties in with that isolation from connecting with other people, right? Maybe we would get rid of the sun, keep them indoors all the time, right? Keep them from access to go out and physically walk outside and breathe fresh air, right? All these things would create a very depressing city, and your avatars are going to be quite depressed, right? Okay. Now, what this is actually called in our modern day is funny you even made this statement. It sounds like our reality, right? We have a phrase for what this is, and that is a statement here by Clark University. It says, the growing number of depressed people can be attributed to a depressogenic society, a society that places many of its members at risk for developing depression. Okay. So it's funny and ironic, it's sad that is, unfortunately, the society we tend to live in, right? Especially ever since 2020. Have we not been isolated from people, right? Have we not been far more focused on social media and comparing ourselves with other people? Not being able to get the physical exercise we need, the resources and the necessities that we need in our lives, right? And so that is what is called a depressogenic society. Statistics here to walk through. Back in 2003. 2003, there was a poll done, and this isn't just for people that were struggling with sadness or having a hard time. This is for people that diagnosed in the United States with major depressive disorder, okay? So they were diagnosed cases, meaning there was probably more because they didn't diagnose everybody in the country. But this is by birth cohort. So you've got ages 60 plus, you are roughly around 10% of individuals struggling with depression or major depressive disorder. And as the age groups went up, younger and younger, those rates continued to go up to the point where generally college age kids are roughly about 25% back in 2003. Now again, that's almost 20 years ago. So let's take a different look at this. Let's look at the way that it's looking at in kind of a bar graph. So this is a bar graph, and I want to compare a side-by-side comparison of the same report that was done in 2020. I guess you guys can probably assume what happened. Come 2020, ages 60 plus went from 15 to 30%. Individuals in 45 to 59 went from a little bit over, close to 20%, close to 45. And then when you get here into your college ages, which is obviously anybody can be in college, but typically you've got anywhere between 18 to 45 is your college range. You're roughly almost 60% of individuals as of 2 years ago have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. This is massive, right? The numbers are just skyrocketing like we've never seen before. And again, we can look back at what we have, a depressogenic society. Things have not gotten better since 2003 for that depressogenic society. We continue to experience it more and more and more of this isolation, more of that depressed edition of SimCity, right? Back in the 70s, Dr. George Albee was commissioned by the US government to start addressing what was a mental health crisis back then. And he went out and he did a bunch of research and studying, and what he came back to the US government and said, amongst many things, was that he believes we will never have enough trained professionals to address the mental health crisis we had back in the 70s. Do you think we have more now adequate enough to address the numbers we just saw? No, we don't. So he's absolutely right. We will never have enough trained professionals. And I want to make it very clear, and speaking to one trained professional, I don't know how many in here are licensed therapists, but we need every single licensed therapist we can, but it's never going to be enough. We were just talking beforehand here on campus. You guys have 3, and I applaud you guys for having 3 licensed therapists here on campus to be a support, but that's never going to be enough. They will be taxed out. There will never be enough room for them to be able to meet with all the people that need to have some sort of intervention, right? I want to shift and talk, or read this quote with you guys. This was another research done by the University of Illinois, and this was a statement they made. They said, when work, and you can see this, work for anybody here at the university would be everything you guys are doing 24/7, right? When work intrudes after hours in the form of pings and buzzes from smartphone alerts, it can cause spikes of stress that lead to a host of adverse effects, including negative work rumination, poor effect, and insomnia. And there was much more in that study of what this can be doing. But just showing, I specifically brought this quote up for a university because when you guys think of after hours for work, so for me, I go home and my boss texts me. When you guys go home, you still have homework. You continue on with constant added stress ongoing. And this is talking about the physical effects. The amount of the work rumination is fascinating to me. The ability, it's called presenteeism, to be able to be at school and focusing and trying to get stuff done, but you're really not mentally there, right? So the more we continue to live in a non-stop environment that we live in, the harder it becomes on us, right? And this is often what that feels like, right? Everybody knows this meme here. That's often what it feels like when we are struggling with depression and anxiety and all the stresses that we have going on right now is, well, this is fine, right? We've got fires going all around us, but this is fine. I'm just gonna have to keep going because that's all I have is to keep going. Now, a few years back, we did a study here at ImpactSuite. We interviewed a group of individuals that were struggling with severe depression. And we asked them a series of questions, and this is some of the answers that we got. So we asked them, what is depression? Okay. Their response was, it's that little glitch in my brain that doesn't produce the chemical that lets me be happy and content. I want to emphasize the word chemical there. Yeah, we continued that up by asking them, do you think that it can get better? And they said, I don't think that's possible. Just a couple years ago, I faced it that I'm just always going to be dealing with this. And then we asked them, who told you that you don't get better? And they said, well, and this was a common trend throughout all the people we interviewed, well, my initial diagnosis, they told me that this was something permanent, that this is something that I will always have. Now, how many of you heard this exact narrative? Right?
Oh, yeah.
That depression and anxiety is a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's something you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. Even addictions, the addictions that you face, you were born with it. It's something that's in part of you, and you're just going to face it for the remainder of your life, right? So the question I have for you guys today is that true? Is this true, that you're born with this? There's a chemical imbalance and something you're going to have to face the rest of your life. Because if it is, if this is true, then we need to own up to that. And we need to figure out a solution to how to cope. And that's frankly what we've done in society for the last 50 some odd years, is we've continued to push them towards therapists, which is great, we need that, but that alone is not enough. We've continued to push medication for them to be hooked onto medications that are going to numb them and keep them from the pains or help them overcome their addictions. And yet it continues to get worse. We saw the numbers at the beginning, it just continues to get worse. So is this really true, or is there a better way to approach this? I want to talk about a study done by Dr. Edward Schefflin back in early 2000s, I believe. Dr. Edward Schefflin went and lived up amongst a group of individuals in the Kaluili tribe in Papua New Guinea. It was a tribe of individuals, obviously living very different lives than we live here in the modern United States. And he went there with the express purpose to find if he could discover depression and anxiety and what the difference is. Because if this is true, that it's a biological thing, you were born with it, it's a chemical imbalance, then it must be true across the world. So he went and found some of the most remote places in the world to see if this is true. He lived there for 10 years. He interviewed and did deep studies with over, I think, 3,000 individuals. And this is what he said at the conclusion of his 10-year research. He said, despite living very hard lives with none of the material comforts or medical advances we can take for granted, clinical depression is almost completely non-existent, with only one person in over 2,000 interviews who came close to meeting the diagnostic criteria for depression. So if depression is built into our DNA, it's something we're born with, it's just a chemical imbalance inside of our brain, why is it when he went there and interviewed over 2,000 people, he couldn't find a single person that's actually diagnosed with depression and anxiety? Okay. This has gone to many other studies. They have gone throughout Brazil, they've gone throughout Amish communities here in the United States, a bunch of these that are secluded from our modern way of living, and they've continued to find this exact same trend, that it's non-existent in those areas, which has led them to believe that the diseases of lifestyle that we all know, diabetes, asthma, allergies, things that are caused by the way we live, we can add to those depression and addiction, which is something that we unfortunately still in our modern day don't think about. We think of it as, it's not a disease of lifestyle, it's a way that we are born with, and it's something we can't control. When in reality, science for the past 20, 30 years through these research has taught us, these are diseases of lifestyle. These are not simply something you're born with. Dr. Stephen Alardi said it really great. He said, we were never designed for the sedentary, indoor, sleep-deprived, socially isolated, fast food-laden, screen-addicted, frantic pace of modern life. That's not what our bodies were designed for, right? So no wonder we live in a depressive-genic society. Look at all of that. That's a fantastic way to sum up SimCity Depression Edition, right? Is if we are living in that type of pace, of course we're going to be struggling with depression and anxiety. Well, over the years, the science has thought that our brain was more like a tofu, something that if you pushed into it would stay, it was impressionable, it would only stay in that way. There was no way to change that back, right? But what we've found in modern research is that our brains, The neurons firing inside of our brains create pathways, and these pathways can be rewritten. These pathways aren't permanently changed through our life experiences, right? And more recently, and this is very exciting for us as a corporation, and when I say more recently, this came out I think a month and a half ago, there's been decades of research being done on what's called serotonin, which is that chemical imbalance inside of our brain, and this is what they've said. They said the chemical imbalance theory of depression is still put forward by professionals, and the serotonin theory in particular has formed the basis of considerable research effort over the last few decades. The general public widely believes that depression has been convincingly demonstrated to be the result of serotonin or other chemical abnormalities. And this belief shapes how people understand their moods, leading to the pessimistic outlook on the outcome of depression and a negative expectancies about the possibility of self-regulating mood. That was a mouthful of what we're saying. Here it kind of sums it down a little bit better. This is one of the individuals involved in that research. She said, I think that we can safely say that after a vast amount of research conducted over several decades, there is no convincing evidence that depression is caused by a serotonin abnormality, particularly by lower levels of reduced activity of serotonin. So that chemical imbalance that we were talking about before, all the way up to just a month ago, they finally have launched research saying, that's not true, yet that's what we've been pushing for so long. If you look at almost any medication out there, it's to balance the serotonin inside of your brain, and that's supposed to help you overcome depression and anxiety. When in reality, most times, it's numbing to the brain. Here's a few other good quotes that I really like in this regard. It says, your depression makes sense. Your depression and anxiety are not malfunctions, they are signals. This isn't something that you were just born with a deficit in. They're signals that something in your life has caused this. Something in your life is wrong that we need to change, right? Another point was from Laura Delano. Fantastic individual. I would strongly encourage you guys to watch her video. She has many videos out there, but she herself many times has attempted to take her own life. Okay? She has battled depression and anxiety most of her life, and most of her life she has been told that this is something she was going to deal with forever. It was a chemical imbalance, everything we've been talking about here. And she had determined that if she ever got through this, she would become an advocate for mental health out there. And this is the quote that she has, and she is through it, and she's a phenomenal advocate. She says, your urge to die is really an urge to live, just in an entirely different way than you know. And I love that, okay? It's a sign, again, that you're living in a way that isn't conducive to strong mental health. So when we understand what really is causing our depression and anxiety, we can get real solutions, right? So if we continue to go down this path of what science has been telling us for a long time that isn't true, then we're never going to find real solutions, okay? Less than 3% of US Americans are living a healthy lifestyle. That's just another interesting fact to throw in there. Now I want to walk through some studies. This is where it starts to get exciting, okay? Because before it kind of was getting a little bit dark and depressing as I was talking about that. So let's talk about some really fascinating studies. This one was done back in 2004. We have at ImpactSuite, we have a philosophy that we all live by, and that is eat, breathe, move, sleep. Eat, breathe, move, sleep. If you take nothing else from today, take that. Eat, breathe, move, sleep. Okay? So there's been a study done focused on nutrition, tons of studies done focused on nutrition. This one specific, individuals just changed their diet. They didn't change anything else. They're struggling with depression, anxiety. They changed their diet. And those individuals, 30% of them, no longer were depressed. And I think it was, what's the number on there? Almost all of them, it doesn't say exactly, but almost all of them improved in their changes in depression and anxiety. And that was from just changing one form of their lifestyle, the way they ate. Breathe. Okay? There was a study done on individuals that were taking time to meditate, to breathe, to work through and be mindful of the problems that they're having. And 50% of all those individuals, they had a 50% decrease in the relapse rates for depression and anxiety. Right? Move. This one's very exciting to me. This was done about a 30-minute brisk walk. If you take a 30-minute brisk walk 3 times a week, it has the same effect as the leading medication for depression and anxiety. Okay? And lastly is sleep. And this one was done just last year by Harvard. And they were able to show that every hour that you, and it doesn't continue on, but within a 2-hour block of if you change and go to sleep 1 hour earlier and get up 1 hour earlier, it will decrease depression by 23%. When they did that to 2, I think it went to almost 45% that it decreased depression and anxiety. Now, of course, you can't keep going on in that and changing your sleep by 5-10 hours and going to bed at 5 in the afternoon and getting up at 5 in the morning or 2 in the morning. That doesn't work. But if we are getting to bed earlier and getting up earlier, it has a massive impact on our sleep, or on our depression and anxiety. So what I'm trying to get at here is real solutions, real science, real understanding of what the problem is with depression and anxiety and addiction in our society. This research is a big crux of what we are based off of, and this is a fantastic example of how a process called therapeutic lifestyle adjustments can make a difference in depression, anxiety, and addictions. So this study was done, and they took a group of severely depressed individuals. They split them up into 2 groups, one of them being represented by this black line, where they simply did medication and visited with the therapist for a 6-week period, 30-day period. I can't remember the exact time frame. That's not on here. But they met with them for a short period of time. And all they did was visit with therapists and take medication, and they went from severely depressed to moderately depressed, which in our society right now, people are like, great, they're not on the edge of suicide, which is fantastic, but they're still depressed, they're still struggling. Whereas they took that other group and they worked with a therapist, but those therapists helped them improve their nutrition, change the environment around them, improve their sleep, improve their exercise routines, work on mindfulness, and work on building relationships with others. This is called therapeutic lifestyle changes. As they worked through that, those individuals went from severely depressed to minimally depressed in that exact same time frame. And as they followed up over time, those individuals continued to improve and continued to get better, right? So what we're saying here is that the experiences we live with, the things that we do, they change our brain for good or for bad. The way that we're living our life can change our brain. Now, this should sound extremely hopeful, because the story we've been telling before was a very depressing story about depression that you're going to deal with it the rest of your life, right? What we're telling you now is extremely hopeful, saying you can overcome depression and anxiety. You can overcome addictions, right? And science continues to back this up. This isn't just me being happy and being like, hey, think positive. That's not what we're talking about here. There's actual scientific basis of how it is we can overcome depression and anxiety. And that's where I want to shift gears a little bit more and talk about ImpactSuite, where we came from, what we've been doing. About 10 years ago is when our organization started. Prior to that, our CEO had been running a nonprofit, driving awareness campaigns for pornography addiction. Through that time, he had met with neuroscientists all over the world. He had met with specialists and therapists from all over the world, and he had done so much, or dug into them with so much of their research and continued to find out more and more about this therapeutic lifestyle adjustment. And that's where the ImpactSuite brand started, as we started with our first app, which was a pornography addiction app. And it was based in this concept of therapeutic lifestyle adjustments. We've expanded that to having an alcohol and addiction recovery app, and I'll actually go over those in just a minute, and also a depression and anxiety app. All of these apps have now been circulating and being used all over the world for the past 10 years. And a little bit later, I'm going to show you some of the data of how it's actually made a significant impact in the lives of these people. But this was created, we took it back and we teamed up with a group of clinical experts and an advisory board, created these tools, these apps, and we pulled together and closed that science practice gap, which right now, again, the science has been telling us that therapeutic lifestyle adjustment works, but our practice has been push medication and therapy, and that's all they need, right? Even though we know that that's clearly not the only solution and that's not what's working. And so we've tried to close that gap by using an app-based form to be able to help people overcome depression and anxiety and change their lives, right? As I mentioned before, these are the 4 different apps that we have. One focused on depression and anxiety, one on substance abuse, one on sexual compulsivity, and then one just on personal growth, because mental health is not something that you deal with only at your darkest and lowest moments in your life. Mental health is something that we need to be addressing at all times, right? And so for those people that are like, yeah, these don't really cover me, they have an app that's designed just for them to continue to grow, to continue to become a better person, and therefore hopefully avoid ever falling into a pit of one of these, right? And so those 4 apps all operate exactly the same. The content inside is just slightly different. What we do inside there is we have assessments that they can take to be able to go in and understand what lifestyle areas are they struggling in, which one areas are their strengths, and which areas are their weaknesses. And these assessments can be taken on a weekly basis and on an ongoing basis. We break this down by learning, connecting, and tracking. So for that learn portion, you learn about yourself and understand through assessments what lifestyle areas is a strength or a weakness for you. From there, once you've learned which areas are strengths and weaknesses, you can go down this path of journeys. These journeys are videos that are created by these clinical board of advisors from experts in this field of how to improve in these various different lifestyle areas. So if it tells you, it looks like you're struggling with your sleep and your finances, well, we have a sleep and a finance journey for you. It's a 10-day journey that takes you in small iterative changes to improving your lifestyle. Because if I come to you and I tell you, you're struggling with depression and anxiety, it's because of the way you're living, you just need to change, that's overwhelming, right? But if I come to you and I say, we've taken an analysis for you, all you have to do is just start in one little step. Go out and just watch this video. From that, it's gonna give you advice of maybe adjust your sleep by 1 hour tonight. Or just get your phone turned off before you go to bed, an hour before you go to bed, right? It's gonna give just small iterative little pieces of advice of how to improve in those areas, because that's how real growth comes, not by just telling you, hey, make a change overnight. And then there's a whole list of meditations in there as well. Meditations around food, meditations around morning routines, around winding down at night. And so this gives you the opportunity to become more educated about what areas you're struggling in, and meditations to help you become more mindful and practice those beliefs. Next is connecting. Any good addiction recovery program wants you to be connected, right? That's what AA meetings are all about, bringing people together to be able to connect. Connecting with a sponsor, someone that's been through what you've been through before, and someone that can lift you up and carry you through your hard times. Tara and I were just talking with a student before this, actually, that he brought that up. He said, oftentimes at nighttime, I'm just alone, and I don't know who to talk to, I don't have anybody to talk to, and that's what's leading to my mental health challenge. And so, of course, the best form of that is to be able to connect in person, but we can't always be doing that. So we've built into our apps a whole community of individuals that are struggling with the same challenge. So if you're inside that depression and anxiety app, you're able to connect with a community of people struggling with depression and anxiety. And our therapists monitor these platforms, and it's a safe place for you to anonymously share your experiences, share what you've been dealing with. And our therapists can be able to respond to that. Other individuals that are dealing with the same challenges can respond. And it's an open public forum inside of our app for individuals to have these conversations and be real with each other and guide each other and help each other. We also have the ability to be able to connect with our wellness consultants, as well as therapists and lifestyle coaches, which I'll talk about in a minute. We also have a function here that I don't have pulled up called allies. So if I wanted to work with somebody as an ally, or as in an AA program, it's called a sponsor, I can invite them to be a part of this app, and they can see all of my data, and we can have direct messaging, and it can send them notifications on days that I have a bad day. So if I record that I had a bad day, it'll send a ping to my ally, and they can reach out to me and say, hey, looks like you've been having a rough day. Let's go talk, or let's go out to lunch, right? And so this gives an opportunity for them to be able to see the data, work with each other, and continue to have that connected support. And lastly is tracking. Tracking is pivotal to being able to overcome any sort of addiction or mental health challenge. So what we've built into our program is simple daily trackers that you can take. I take it every night before I go to bed, and it goes through, it's literally like a 30-second survey that asks me about my day, the emotions I felt, whether I relapsed or didn't relapse, or it doesn't really use those terms, a healthy day or an unhealthy day. Over time, you're able to start to see trends in your life. You're able to start seeing trends of, these are the activities that tend to lead to me being happy, and these are the activities that tend to happen around the days that I'm sad. Here's the positive days of the week, and these are the days that tend to be bad days of the week. What activities are happening around those things, right? So you're able to start tracking your progress ongoing. And again, you can share that with friends and family. You can share it with therapists. You can share it with coaches. This data is all accessible for you to be able to share or keep to yourself as you'd like. Helps you start to understand yourself better. Because we all know we probably could do better with sleep. But if we can start to see a trend of every single night that we struggle with sleep, that's when we relapse in our addictions, we're going to know it's far more serious, right? Or if we start to recognize, oh, I didn't even notice, but my relationship with X, Y, or Z person is part of what's impacting my depression and anxiety, right? These are gonna help you unroot and kind of pull out that type of data. And you're able to set goals and track these things ongoing, and see all sorts of behavioral statistics inside of the app. And like I said before, we're able to connect you with mental health coaches, So not just therapists, but coaches in these lifestyle areas. If you're struggling with sleep, you can talk to a sleep specialist. If you're struggling with exercise routines, reach out to an exercise specialist. If you're struggling with the food that you're eating, reach out to a nutritionist. Because a lot of us feel that there's unfortunately a stigma around therapy of if I'm going to therapy, it's because I'm broken or depressed or struggling. That's not always true. You can go to therapy for anything, but if you don't want to go to therapy, go talk to a coach. Because everybody could use some coaching, right? And then also access to, oh, I don't know what I pushed there. The screen just went black. Oh, okay, we're back. Teletherapy. And our teletherapy is uniquely different in the sense that we have a wide range of therapists all over the country, and frankly, we're about to launch throughout the entire world. And you are able to access any of those therapists across the country and talk to them within 1 to 2 days. So you're able to sort through this list, talk to those therapists, and when we offer this out to communities like the Butte College, it would be no session limit therapy. Meaning you can call in and talk to a therapist when you need to at any time. And of course it's within 1 to 2 days, but it's 1 to 2 days instead of 6 months. You're not having to try to figure out how this goes through your health insurance, how to figure out how am I gonna drive to go meet with this person when I live all the way up here in Butte College, right? You can jump on, do a 30-minute Zoom call, 50-minute Zoom call with a therapist anywhere across California or frankly across the United States as a coach and chat with those individuals. And all of our therapists are trained on our platforms, so they're going to continue to direct people back towards these tools. We've been told regularly that we can get more done in 1 visit with our therapist than you can in 3 with a typical therapist because they have these tools. They can see the data, they can see the trends, they can tell them, hey, after you're done with this visit, go watch these learning modules, go watch these training modules, right? And then next time when we talk, let's see how you've progressed in between. So we have tools to back up the therapy visits as well. Now, I want to talk about some of the statistics, and this will sound like I'm bragging for a minute, but it's because I'm very proud of what we've done here at ImpactSuite. Like I said, we have been in almost every country throughout the world of individuals utilizing our technology. The number, so it's hundreds of thousands of people in over 150 countries for the past 10 years. So the data I'm about to share is not just, oh, we lucked out over the last year. This is hard evidence and data that we've pulled from the last 10 years in almost every country throughout the world. Individuals that use our app on a regular basis, meaning 3 to 4 times a week. So not every single day, just 3 to 4 times a week, are seeing an 85% decrease in their depression and anxiety and an 88% decrease in compulsive patterns. Remember that graphic I showed you before with the hockey stick change in depression and anxiety? Because of therapeutic lifestyle adjustments, we're seeing exactly that here. Those that are working and utilizing these tools can see a drastic decrease in depression and anxiety and in their compulsive behaviors, their addictive behaviors that they're dealing with. If we're wanting to prevent school shootings, prevent suicides, prevent the students that aren't able to succeed as well at college because they're struggling with mental health challenges and apathy, this is a great tool for them to be able to use. But I want to talk about what it does to individuals that only use it a few times a month. That's this purple bar right here. Those that are using this just a few times a month are still seeing a 25% decrease and a 21% decrease in their addictions and depressive behaviors. Meaning if you get in here and watch a training video, do a meditation, take a tracker just a few times a month, it gives you the tools and power to be able to start making a significant change in your life. Of all of our users, hundreds of thousands of users across the whole world, 90% of them have shared the feedback, the data that we can pull from the system. 90% of them have reported back a consistent experience of lasting change in their life. This isn't just a temporary band-aid of putting medication in your system or talking to a therapist. This is a substantial change of your lifestyle, the way that you're living, so you can get out of that depressed edition of SimCity and start living a happier and healthier life. And that's what we've created here at ImpactSuite. That's the solutions that we have. And that's what we'll come to be able to hopefully present here to Butte College and see if it's a tool that they can get used and put in the hands of your individuals. And that's what I have for you today. Any questions, thoughts? I mean, we can talk about it, but.
I wonder if, and I know the answer, I just wonder if you think this is a means for, I don't know, given your research, I doubt that, but would it override the need for a face-to-face? Would it out the opportunity to meet with a therapist in real time? Is it going to be so successful that you don't need a therapist anymore?
So, okay, you just mean in general, not needing a therapist.
Yeah.
Of course, every situation is going to be very different. We're not here to say that we're going to heal the world, that we're going to change everybody, your entire campus is going to be free of depression and anxiety. That's just not going to happen, unfortunately. It's all on an individual basis, the way that we approach this, the drive that we have to try to overcome these things. And some things are a much deeper and longer rooted challenge than others. So for us to come in and say, hey, give us 6 weeks and your whole campus is going to be off of therapy, that's not the case. But the numbers we've been looking at right now is we are almost consistently seeing about a 2-year use case of our app. And then the people leave. And when we interview them when they leave, it's because they say, we don't need the app anymore. We're doing good. Right? Now, does that mean they don't have problems anymore in their lives? No, obviously not. Do they still occasionally need to go in and see a therapist and call a therapist because they're going through something hard and we should make that a regular standard for our life? Yes. But the ultimate goal is to get individuals self-sustaining, off of medications, off of therapy, and then as needed be able to use those cases instead of having that be the ultimate solution. So it's a complicated answer. It's not one to say that you're going to be off of it for the rest of your life or that we're going to solve all the problems. But the main goal and what we've seen consistently happening is getting people to where they are self-sustaining and have the tools in their hands to be able to go back and stop things before it gets worse.
I have a couple of questions. Because, well, first of all, I had to restrain myself when you were bringing up some of those studies because I was going to do it like 20 minutes beforehand. the one about the chemical imbalance in Papua New Guinea, and I knew about all that, so I got really excited.
Good, good. I actually haven't met anybody that knows that. That's great.
I was going to say that in like 20 minutes. I actually had read all of those research papers that you brought up.
Okay,
but so my question, because I've looked at, because just she's all nerdy and I like data, so I was combing through a lot of your stuff. One of the things that I thought about, because if you look at Butte County in general, just and I've done this, I've looked at all the public health data, pretty much. We have some of the highest ACE scores in the country. We're up there with Detroit, parts of the Midwest. So as far as
is that more recent since?
No, this is well, it's been on a downward slope, but between the hammer of the fires and the anvil of COVID,
I guess that's what I meant by more recent.
Yeah, then if you overlap that with economic disparities in rural environments, plus the overarching quality of life degradation in terms of deaths of despair, suicide, opiate addiction, methamphetamine is a big problem, and this sort of lack of resources. So we have this incredible amount of post-traumatic stress disorder, specifically post-traumatic stress disorder. She knows more about this than I do, at least on the ground. So I'm wondering, because when you're in a sort of dissociative state of shock, do you have something specific for like panic attacks, dissociative states? Because they might not necessarily have the wherewithal in those moments of panic to utilize certain resources. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if there is a way around just the post-traumatic stress issue, because I know you have an anxiety app, but how does it work on that front specifically? And then my other question is, do you have techniques adapted for certain special populations? This might be cultural disparities, or in my case, I have a mild case of autism and cerebral palsy. And for example, in cerebral palsy, because of the damage to cerebellum, there's a 30% increase in anxiety and depression. Insomnia is a big one, high blood pressure, things like that. So do you have access to resources for people in special situations? So say like, for example, I want to get in touch with an exercise therapist because physically I'm not the most like, I have difficulty being mobile in the first place. Are they going to have the institutional knowledge to know how to deal with me specifically because I'm dealing with the problems of cerebral palsy, say?
For sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic question. I would say we're ever growing, ever changing, trying to add and improve the systems.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, getting down to that type of a specific thing,
Mm-hmm.
we may not have the resources inside of the app for someone with cerebral palsy or bipolar disease or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The therapist will have the knowledge of what type of resources to direct them towards,
Okay, cool.
right?
That's
So
really all
our
you can
apps
do,
no,
yeah.
but the therapists, yes.
Okay,
the
so
therapist
you
can
can
direct.
make referrals to that effect. Right.
100%.
Okay.
Those therapists are all licensed, trained individuals that will have the resources to be able to direct you outside of our solutions for additional help beyond into those specifics.
Okay, because in my case, it's like specifically, I fall into the category of a traumatic brain injury, right? And so that's a little wonky.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
You'll end up with like trippy fluctuations in your endocrine system, and there's all kind of stuff and things happening. I'm just wondering, because like for example, I've had to struggle for years to find a competent physical therapist, even though they're like well-meaning, but they're like, you know, CrossFit cult members or something like that, which is like a really scientifically proven way to injure yourself as creatively as possible. and so, you know, and it's a good cult. I like it as cults go. It's very nice. But I'm wondering, you know, so like somebody who's in a situation like that, or like you deal with a very specific population, right? Are they gonna have the judo necessary to be like, oh, we got one of those, like we gotta pivot, you know, and make referrals and that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
These therapists are licensed therapists that have been practicing all over the nation for years.
Okay,
right?
so and if they don't know someone, they know someone who
Yeah,
knows someone.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would work just as any sort of therapy organization in that sense.
Okay.
And then to answer your first question on those struggling, I mean specifically with trauma, we have trauma specific programs to help individuals. We have a 24/7 crisis support line that someone can call anytime, day or night. So if they don't have access to a therapist immediately, obviously they can call our 24/7 crisis support line. We also have a panic button in there that if they click it, it'll give them, it brings up what are you feeling, you click on what you're feeling, and then it'll direct you towards all sorts of emotions that you might be feeling and things that you can be doing to work through that. So,
Okay, and
so
then-
we have some iterative or small little adjustments for those.
Okay, and then my one other question, even though I have like about a jillion, because like I said, I've done a lot of research. But are you well coordinated? And this is a touchy issue. I'm sure your lawyers would be very freaked out if I'm asking this question. But are you well coordinated with things like, for example, in this county specifically, we've got a super high incidence of like sexual trauma, domestic violence, and because we're in a rural area, it's like we'll get to it because they're dealing with like a bajillion of those. So are you well coordinated with law enforcement?
That's actually funny that you asked that. So we just released an app where we worked with law enforcement for creating all the content throughout the United States for parenting apps of how to help keep kids safe from sex trafficking, online abuse, depression, or bullying, things like that.
Okay.
Now, I wouldn't say necessarily that means we're going to be able to get law enforcement to your door.
Not
That is community specific,
Of
of
course,
course. But the knowledge and concepts behind all this, we're very well versed in abuse and sexual crimes,
Mm-hmm.
and a big part of our nonprofit is helping stop sex trafficking across the world. So that is absolutely a big portion of where the knowledge and research and studies come from.
Okay, because I was trying to work with the Native American community. I'm well connected to a couple of the tribes, and I like research, so I was reading
Can
research,
tell.
and they there is legislative weirdness between, say, the Native American reservations and local law enforcement. Because of weird politics, they're not allowed to share crime data with each other.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those incidents go unreported. Plus the community, and the same is true of the Latinx community and several others, is very insular, so they're not necessarily incentivized to communicate those things in the first place, but even if they wanted to, they couldn't, right? Now there are some avenues, but every now and then you get into these weird sort of jurisdictional pissing matches and nothing gets done, right? And so I'm wondering if this suite could be modified in such a way to ameliorate some of those problems, mainly the communication and sharing of certain pieces of key data to solve those problems.
That's not up my alley. That's a great concept, great idea.
I think that's a good time, Mark, maybe to mention what you were saying earlier in terms of cultural referral to
Yes.
a competent therapist in
In the field.
whatever niche, you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you shared with me the one of the African-American woman, and, they have the triage, for lack of a better word, to refer.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's same type of idea.
Right.
So you can call into our, I think this is what you're getting at, you can call into our crisis support line and say, I would like to talk to a therapist. They can schedule a therapy visit for you, and you can say, this is the type of therapist I'd like to see.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
by legal guidelines, you only can talk to a licensed therapist in your state as a licensed
There's
therapist,
different
but we
states.
have them all over the nation. And so if they say, well, we don't have one in your state that is that exact guideline, but we do in Chicago, you can meet with them under the guise of a coach. And then you can still meet with them. It's still a licensed therapist.
Very clever.
It's just under the guise of a coach.
Okay.
So you
It's just
still,
changing the terminology to fit within legal
exactly.
guidelines.
And they are not able to diagnose certain things because of that. But
They're
it'll be the
hamstring.
exact same type of experience that you would have if it was someone within your own state.
Okay.
So it opens up that to a wide variety of individuals that you could potentially work with in that regard. And of course, we're not always,
Specific niches,
Yeah.
sorry,
with specific niches that
Exactly.
are, forte, gift, talent, skill, experience.
Okay, cool. Well, that pretty much answers all my very complicated and long-winded questions.
No, I appreciate it. And there's so many, of course, you know, I'm not trying to come here and say we have the answer to everything.
Uh-huh.
You know, we understand that there's so many unique scenarios that are always going to come up. What we're attacking here is more of that broad challenge that we're dealing with in society. And again, like we've said at the very beginning of this, it's a paradigm shift of how we're approaching addiction, depression, and anxiety in our society, right? And so, no, that's that. Thank you for all your questions, though. Yeah. Tara.
Do you build relationships with the therapists that you speak with? So, do you get to keep calling back? Do you build, or is it always rotate?
Yes.
Unless you're getting really needy.
I might be getting needy. Do I get the
Which-
same person?
No session limit, so if you want to go visit with that same therapist, absolutely. You are in control of that. Oftentimes through programs like Modern Health or others, you have to call and be diagnosed to tell you which one to talk to.
Right.
This setup, you either can call and ask them and state what you want, and they'll try to direct you to one of those, or you can go into our apps, scroll through our database of hundreds of different therapists, read their bios, see what their ethnicity is, see what their specialties are, and then choose that therapist. It pulls up their calendar. You can choose your time to visit with them, and then you can keep setting appointments at that same one, or keep trying out different ones.
Great.
So it gives you that control to be able to do it.
Right where you sign.
Seems like excellent kung fu to me. I'm into it.
I actually used to be something like, I used to work with clients in this specific way.
Cool.
We were kind of support services and my specialty was kind of working with elements of counseling and I would help
Awesome.
with nutrition, sleep and all that stuff. And a lot of what you're talking about are exactly the type of thing that I would recommend to people.
Mhm.
And
You get it.
Shoot, I was just helping a lady with that just as I walked in here.
As I say, often therapists are doing this. Therapists understand this,
Yeah.
but they don't have a tool for it.
Or
They
the-
often don't, or they have a very, very rudimentary tool to follow up with. And that's the difference, is this is giving a tool in the hands of the individual to use.
So I'm just speaking now as a media psychologist. I always get challenged. Once this data goes into the app, who owns that data?
I was gonna ask that
Great
question.
So all of that data, of course, is stored in a secure place on our
Blockchain.
our area. But the data is not shared with anybody else unless that individual wants to. So they have all the privacy to that data. When they create the account, they can put in a fake username and a fake email address. So really the ability to track it down to that individual is very, very hard to do.
So no targeted marketing, anything like that.
No. We do obviously push notifications to improve people getting into the things, but
And sensitivity of your analytics, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
But the great thing is we can grab this data as an aggregate. So for Butte College, we can set you up as a organization within our company and inside of our backend tools. And we can aggregate all of the data that's being collected from your students and then share that back to you as an organization and say, it looks like 10% of your students are struggling in this area. And you've seen growth in this lifestyle area over the last little bit, and you've seen some decreases in these lifestyle areas. And we would assign you a wellness consultant that is a trained individual, a therapist, that can work with your campus to read through that data and understand, okay, what other programs can we be doing with our students and with our faculty, because this goes to both. What programs can we be doing to hit these pain points based off of the data that we're seeing? Of course, it's not going to say Tara specifically is struggling with this. It's more of an aggregate whole for the whole community. And that brings up another point as well, is rolling this out to your campus, rolling this out to your students and your faculty isn't solely on your guys' shoulders. We bring in a wellness consultant, and part of it would be that they would be willing to come out here in person at least 2 times a year to help roll this out with, if you guys do, you get belonging today?
Yeah, belonging.
Yeah, we could set up a booth and be able to talk with students and get them enrolled, get them signed up to these things. We can work with sending out videos and trainings throughout here. We can come and do faculty trainings. We can do, we can meet with your mental health department and work with them, right? We are very committed to helping roll this out to your students. And like I said, 2 times in person in here, and then as often as you need to virtually. We have access to all of our coaches and our specialists. So if you guys say, hey, we'd love to have a presentation done to our student body on sleep, we could pull in our sleep experts and have them give a presentation, right? And so this is something that we would be very involved with you in helping roll this out. It's not just on your shoulders to do it yourself.
That's cool. I've been trying to get programs like that off the ground